So today we're dealing with the dreaded rubber bumper B heater controls. Let's get going. So what we have here is a 78 MGB American spec car. And the heater wasn't working, and he wanted to have the heater working. So first thing we look at is the heater control to see if it's on or off. Now this position's on. When it came in, it was in the off position all the way up here. Now, the first thing you do is operate the heater controls to see if that moves. Well, it didn't move at all. Now, in this case, the end of this is a little bit tore up. These are the plastic cased cables that the late cars have, and these things tend to get brittle and they crack and break, and it's already been pulled forward and chopped off a little bit, and so it still works. But since it wouldn't move here with the heater control, the next thing we do is go to the console. So in order to deal with the heater controls on the later rubber bumper car, they're in the console here instead of in the dash like the earlier cars are. So you have to take the whole console out to actually get in there and work, which means usually the radio and everything has to come out because they're all in here. Now the cables are short and there's not much room to work. When you pull them out here, see, really, it's about all you can really move it to get in there and work with the cables hooked up. So when I got up in here, I found that this screw was loose, so this was not actually being clamped here, so it was just sliding back and forth, which obviously won't allow you to turn the heat on or off. So I got that clamped, and then now when you turn it, it all moves like it's supposed to. And start it up, run it, got heat when you turn it on, and no heat when you turn it off like you're supposed to. But now it's stuck on defrost. It won't switch from defrost to floor. Now the problem with that one, this is on the other, this is back in here. See if I can adjust the light here. Right there is the other heater control back here. Now I'll see the cable there. See what it does? Somebody has gone through the process somewhere in the past and replaced that cable, which is a real pain in the butt on these things, but put a stranded cable in instead of a solid one. It has to be a solid cable because it has to push and pull. That cable will only pull, it won't push. So we need to change that. So what I actually had in stock right now was the proper replacement cable for the temperature control, which is a longer cable than the air control cable is. And actually the new cables you get are just like the old cables, or the metal braided, or the metal spiral cable, and then they're just covered in like a heat shrink wrap to make it look like the original plastic ones. So these things won't all bust up and shred like the plastic ones casings will. So I think they're better. So what we're going to do, since I have this cable, I could actually just cut this one down to the right length because the other one's shorter. But since the end of this one's tore up anyway, we got to disconnect this to be able to pull the console out and work on it, I'm going to go ahead and get all that apart, replace this cable going to the temperature control, and then we'll take this cable and use it probably just for the inner piece, but I'll be cutting this down to use this for the other cable. So in order to do this, we're going to end up having to take the heater out, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. So you need to go ahead and drain the coolant, which I've already done. And then we take this apart and we'll actually pull this cable on through, and so we can get the console out of the way. So this is what happens to these cables all the time, because the plastic shielding here it just gets brittle and they break, and then you clamp it. And you can actually trim this off, cut this down and pull it up some, but it's already been done and there's no more cable left to do anything with. So that's why we're going to go ahead and cut this down to use as a short cable and put the new long cable in. Now that I got this cable loose from the heater control valve and up on the engine, see, now it gives me a lot more room to pull because this cable gives me a little more slack now, and I can get further behind the console. So then I just need to take this cable clamp loose here and the cable stop down there, and that'll take the cable out of this control. Then I can take the whole console out of the car. So this is one of the heater boxes have an MGB. This is out of a chrome bumper car, but it doesn't really matter. The only thing that changes is 2-speed versus 1-speed fan. But this flips back and forth. Well, here, to go from defrost to footwell. And of course, this is supposed to be connected, but this one isn't. So this is the cable that connects to that control. Well, you see where it's connected to down in here. Because of where it's at here, in relation to where it's into the car, you really can't access it. So here we are up in Ginsu because it's all apart and has the same exact setup because it's a late firewall. See that slot right there? Well, that's where that cable goes through. So that clamp and everything is all sitting right in here. So it's pretty much impossible to get to from inside the car. So there's a screw here and then 3 across here. And depending on the year car, you have various stuff like this clamp here on the late car holding this, which some of the earlier cars didn't have that. And this actually had vacuum line running across here at one time, which isn't there. And then the later rubber bumper cars had a heat shield here. And then you know, all these lines. So all this stuff has to be kind of moved out of the way, and the heater hose is disconnected in order to get this out. And there's one more screw up here holding the top of it here. Now make sure you open the heater control valve so that the heater can drain. And it's a good idea to take the top hose off first to make sure that there's enough air coming in to allow it to drain. So right now it's still draining, so we're going to actually give it another minute before I take it out. So depending on whether your heater's ever been taken out of your car or not, your results may vary on how easy it is to pull out. Sometimes some people just tug and tug and tug and just never seem to get them out. Other times it's like they go right out of there. So you got to get this thing to tilt forward a little bit and get it past these lines, in this case, and pull up. And depending on what year car you actually have, there are like adapters for the hoses for the defrost. Some years have to go in there, that has to be pulled out first. Those are the earlier cars. It can be difficult to pull this out without scratching up this area here. There you go. So on these later cars, the hoses just pop in here, and they should be popped loose and pulled in just like this. Where the other ones had tube extensions that went in there that you physically have to take out on like the 67 and earlier cars. So now that we got this out and on the workbench, we can see this thing moves nice and easy like it's supposed to. It's just that stranded cable cannot do what it's supposed to be doing. Another reason why I say it's pretty much impossible to do from the inside of the car is this seal here that seals it to the firewall. They just give you it's just got a little hole for the cable to go through. So unless you rip all that out and don't have it in there, it's impossible. You just can't get to it without taking this out of the car. So as they say in the British car manuals, reinstallation is reversive removal, except in this case it takes twice as long and twice as much cussing. So what I like to do is pull the cable out of the sheave and lubricate it with a little bit of whatever your favorite lubricant is for cables so that it moves nice and freely on both cables. these heater controls usually work stiff enough as it is. A little extra lubrication can only help. So when you're putting it back in, you kind of have to be a bit careful here. You got to get this thing to go in, and then you got to go inside and make sure that it's kind of routing where you want it. And you got to be careful not to kind of pinch that in there to get it in there. It's a little difficult to get it to go in there without pinching it, and you just got to be aware as you're doing it. So now we get the fun of actually putting this in the car and trying to hook up these cables in all that little tight confine. Yay. All right, so now we got the cable hooked up here. Now I got air coming on the defrost. Now it's no longer on defrost and it's down on your feet. And now it's neither. So it's all working as it's supposed to. So now I just got to put all this stuff back together, get the radio in, all the lights hooked back up here, console in, top it off with coolant, and it's ready to go.